Good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Xavier De La Torre. I'm the Superintendent of Schools in the Ysleta Independent School District. That was an incredible performance. Caperettes, they're wonderful. I'm glad that you've all taken the time to come this evening. I think we have some information that will both be very interesting to you and very instrumental in what you can anticipate from the Ysleta Independent School District, not just over the course of this year, but probably over the course of the next 10 years. And it's important that we understand our realities. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk about what we have as a vision for the school district as it celebrates its 100 years in existence as likely the flagship district of the El Paso area. Before we get started, I'd like to make some introductions. The first introduction is of someone who really requires no introduction, and that's someone who's been an integral part of this community. That's Mr. Shane Haggerty, the trustee for the Parkland area. Please help me welcome him. With us this evening is also our board president, Miss Patricia McLean. Ms. McLean represents the Del Valle learning community. Also with us this evening, representing the Bel Air learning community, Trustee Connie Woodruff. And last but not least, representing the Riverside High School learning community, Miss Ana Dueñas. So the reason we've asked to meet with you this evening, and I appreciate again you taking time to be here. I know that you've all probably worked a full day and you've got other responsibilities and obligations with family, but tonight we really do have important information for you to consider. The Ysleta Independent School District, as I've said, has been in existence for 100 years. For most of those 100 years, this school district has been an influence, an impact, a positive impact on the El Paso community. There was no doubt that at least for 80 years, students that graduated from the Ysleta Independent School District and received a diploma could leave and could count on securing a job that would provide them with a living wage that could not only support themselves but their families. That's changed over time, and so has the district. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight is about 21st century learning, 21st century learning environments, and it's a recognition and acknowledgement that classrooms that were built, classrooms that were developed and designed in the 1920s and the 1930s and 1940s may or may not be adequate in preparing students for the 21st century. And that's what the conversation is about tonight, and that is that this is not driven, the information you're about to hear isn't driven by an interest in saving money or closing or consolidating schools for the purpose of saving money. The entire premise this evening is how can we ensure that students are having the kind of experience in our schools that they need to have if they're going to compete on a global stage, because that's what the economy has become. It's become a global stage where they're no longer competing with the boy down the street or the boy across town for jobs. They're competing with students from China, India, Europe, and other parts of the United States and other developed countries. And so to do anything other than prepare them for that kind of economy is a disservice to students and their families who trust us to provide them with the foundation, with the skills that they'll need to be able to compete in that kind of an environment. And if we can't do that, we are in effect, I believe, and I believe strongly, jeopardizing the economic prosperity that this country has enjoyed for almost 2 centuries. And some people might even suggest our national security. The reason education and immigration reform are so important to the Fortune 500 companies, to CEOs and presidents across this country, is because at present they're having to depend on labor from Asia, India, and Europe to fill high-tech positions in the Silicon Valley and other places like Austin, because at present, most of our public school systems are not providing them with the kind of relevant labor market that they need to thrive in the 21st century. That's what's at the base of all this conversation we're about to have. Here is what I like to call the parade of horribles. The Ysleta Independent School District has been in a pattern of declining enrollment for 25 years. That means that in 1988, it was a banner year. The district had 50,600 students. They had capacity for about 59,000 students. But since 1988, we've seen a decline in enrollment every year for 25 years. Today we have 42,500 students in the district, but every one of those seats are still in the district. Better stated, there are 17,000 empty seats in this school district. Those 17,000 seats are the equivalent of 9 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 1 high school. What I mean is you could close 9 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 1 high school tomorrow, and you could still accommodate all 42,300 students. And not at 100%, but at 80% capacity. If we wanted to put 100% of our students at 100% capacity, the district would require only 34 schools total. We currently have 63. At 80%, we need 46 schools, not 63. For every school that we operate, it costs $1 million annually. That means that we spend $15 million every year on schools that one could argue are grossly underutilized and not necessary. So that's our situation, that's our reality. What isn't in that math problem is the fact that many of these schools have rich, proud traditions and histories, and we're simply not interested in adhering to a math problem and closing schools simply because the math works. So what the board did last spring, about this time last year, is they first asked the most important question, and that is, we're at 42,500 students. Will we always be at 42,500 students? Can we anticipate growth in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Or should we anticipate a continued decline in enrollment so that a district of 42,500 today will be a district of 30,000 in 10 years? And the news was good and bad. What's true is this district will never have 50,200 students, not at least over the next 10-year period, 15-year period. But what's also true is this district will likely remain at about 40,000 to 42,500 students, at least for the next 10 years. So that gives us a starting point. A starting point for what? Well, a starting point for looking at schools that I've said have been with us, in some cases, almost 100 years. And so the second thing that the board did was they commissioned a study of every one of the facilities, every one of the plants, schools in this district, to determine what it would cost, what kind of investment it would take to make sure that students in this district are not at a disadvantage when compared to students who happen to attend schools where growth is accelerated and the schools are all 25 years old or less. And then they took into consideration utilization and capacity, and they came up with a facility condition index. Let me show you what I'm talking about. There we go. That's basically what I shared with you there, that since 1988, this school district, with the exception of 2 years, has seen a decline in enrollment every year. Here's 50,000 plus students. At the top right-hand corner, is this not working? All right. And then just in 2014, from 1 year to the next, we've lost 511 students, 557 students, and this year we've lost another 500 students. This morning we're at 42,300 students. I can tell you what it's not. It's not the quality of education. It's not our academic program. In fact, of the 42,500 students in our district, 6,000 of them don't live in our school district. They live in the Ysleta Independent School District, 4,000 of them. And then the other 2,000 students live in the El Paso Independent School District, Clint, Canutillo, and other surrounding school districts. Because the one thing that is true is that notwithstanding our challenges around our facilities and the condition of our facilities, students in this school district continue to outperform their peers in all surrounding school districts in most categories and at most grade levels. Now that's a testament to the teacher, the person in the four corners of the classroom. So I want to make sure we're clear in that simply improving the facilities, introducing current or emerging technologies, that in and of itself will not improve the educational experience. But it's nice to know that we have the single most important element already, and that is some of the best teachers in the state of Texas in our schools that happen to be providing their craft in facilities that are inadequate, old, and in need of an investment. At present, if you look at the district-wide, we're at 73% utilization. That's 15,077 empty seats. If you include our alternative ed programs, that number climbs to 17,000. What this number here means, what this number here means is that almost at any point in time on any given day, we are heating, cooling, lighting, insuring classrooms. One of every 3 that is empty. 1 in every 3 classrooms every day in the district is empty, isn't being utilized, and yet we're paying for it. That's what it would look like if it were just high schools. We have 7 comprehensive high schools. We could accommodate all high school students in 6. Middle schools. We have 11 middle schools. We could accommodate all middle school students with 3, almost 4 less. And elementary schools. We could accommodate every student with 9 less elementary schools. And this number here, 8,960 empty seats. The majority of school districts in the state of Texas don't have 8,960 students. There are over 1,000 districts in this state, and most of them don't even have 8,960 students enrolled. And we've actually have an entire district of empty seats. Let's take a look at Parkland. This is information from what I'm going to refer to as the Jacob study. The Templeton group came in and they looked at whether or not we could anticipate any growth or any decline in student enrollment, and their conclusion was no, neither. You're not going to grow, but you're not going to decline significantly. So you can go ahead and begin to plan for the next 10 years as if the enrollment that you have today is the enrollment that you're going to have 10 years from now. They firmly believe that. The Jacobs group, the second group that came in and brought a team to visit every one of our schools, had a different scope of work. Their scope of work was to look at the condition of the school, the capacity, and the utilization. So the way they might look at it, do we have another pointer anywhere? The way they may look at it, they'd look at a school like Desert Air Elementary School, for example, and they would consider this. They'd consider that on any given day there are 386 empty seats, that 1 in 3 of the classrooms are empty, and that the Jacobs group has indicated that it would cost $5 million to address that school's current needs this year and for the next 4 years. This figure here, this $4.8 million, covers a 5-year period. That's those things that need to be replaced, renovated, rebuilt, current year and 4 more years. It doesn't suggest that in year 6 you wouldn't have to make another $4.8 million investment for the next 5 years. So it's limited in its scope. Dolphin Terrace, 503 empty seats. North Star, 201 empty seats. Parkland Elementary, 43 empty seats. Neither of these 2 schools need an investment in capital. They're relatively new schools. The other 2 schools have enough students that warrant the investment in money. So later this month, we're going to present the board with a facility master plan that will likely include a recommendation that we go ahead and invest $5 million at Desert Air and almost $6 million at Dolphin Terrace. Middle school. You have 261 empty seats. We need to make an investment of $6 million. It is likely that we will recommend that we make that investment of $6 million at Parkland Middle School. And there's some other considerations that I'll share with you in a minute. And then finally, Parkland High School has 878 empty seats. It's at 40%, and it needs about $10.2 million in improvements. And we'll likely make that recommendation. One of the realities surrounding our Parkland learning community is that it is somewhat separate and distinct from the rest of the district. The opportunity to consolidate schools doesn't exist. We have to support the current system the way it's designed. 4 elementary schools feed into one middle school, that middle school feeds into the high school, and the district is committed to making that investment. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about what we call equity and enhancement. Because the Jacobs Group, when they talk about the investment, what they're talking about is heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC, new roof, new ceiling, new interior paint, new doors, new hardware, new glass, new tile, new carpet, new VCT tile. It's all of that. New electrical systems, new mechanical systems, new fire systems, new public announcement systems. It's an entire renovation that will address any of the current needs and future needs over a 5-year period. It's significant, but it's necessary. In aggregate, the Parkland learning community is at 70%. It's got 2,272 empty seats. But we're going to recommend that we go ahead and support each and every one of those schools. Equity and enhancement. So during the course of this process, we've had an expert demographer come in, and they've given us information on student enrollment. We've had the Jacobs Group, and they've provided us information about the buildings and the condition of the buildings and what it would cost to address the deficiencies. But they didn't address some of the things that are most visible and most important to people, and that is we oftentimes have student athletes or students who participate in the visual and performing arts who come back from other places and wonder how it is that schools in the El Paso Independent School District and schools in the Socorro Independent School District all have artificial surface on their football field, at their stadium. How is it that Eastlake High School can afford the kind of gymnasium that they have at Eastlake High School? Why is it that they have other amenities that we simply don't have in our school district? And that's what impacts us and influences us in terms of those things that fall outside the immediate need of a building. Because our kids, our children, they see it right away. And they wonder why we're not making the same kind of investment in their facilities that other school districts are making in their facilities. They're not interested in hearing that because we're an older school district, because we're geographically landlocked, because we had decline in enrollment, we don't have the resources to do that. And so what happens is sooner or later it becomes hard for their parents and for those students to ignore the fact that if they were going to school somewhere else, that they might have access to amenities and opportunities that they currently don't have in the Ysleta Independent School District. The one thing that, as I've said, has saved the school district is that academically, almost no one can compete. But now we need to take care of them in terms of their co-curricular and extracurricular programs, like athletics, like visual and performing arts, like technology. And so we convened a group of folks, community leaders, business leaders, teachers, coaches, and others, and we asked them to go out and visit some of the schools that students experienced that led them to have those kind of reactions. We first went out and made sure that they understood what we had available in the district. And we've got some new facilities. We've got Eastwood Middle School, we've got Del Valle Elementary School. The pre-K program in Ysleta is a beautiful facility, but in general, most of our schools were built and likely served as flagship schools in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. And they still look like they're in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, right? Because at the time, the Ysleta Independent School District was the district that was experiencing accelerated growth, increased student enrollment, increased resources to be able to provide these facilities for students. Since that time, it has been quite the opposite. It's been a decline in enrollment, a reduction in revenue, and it's been very difficult to make an investment in the buildings because our investment has been aimed at students. Then we went out and we saw some of these facilities. Everybody's familiar with Southwest University Park, Clint High School Stadium, and Clint High School in general. Comprehensive high school in the city of Clint. People I've talked to in the Ysleta Independent School District can't believe that the day has arrived when we use Clint as the gold standard for where we'd like to get. When did that happen? Nevertheless, if you visit Clint High School, they've got a brand new comprehensive high school with brand new stadium and state-of-the-art artificial surface on their football stadium. If you visit the Socorro Independent School District, you'll find that most of their schools are 30 years old or less, and that they've got amazing facilities like gymnasiums, football fields at every high school with artificial surface, unbelievable visual and performing arts, culinary facilities, all a result of a district that's experiencing accelerated growth, revenue, and the beneficiaries of a $300 million facilities bond in 2011. We were also interested in seeing and visiting natatoriums or aquatic centers. As some of you may be aware, the Quality of Life Bond has guaranteed a new natatorium or aquatic center for the people on the west side of El Paso, and then there's a second one planned for the far east in El Paso. What's not planned is any aquatic center, any natatorium for anything even vaguely close to the center of El Paso or where the Ysleta Independent School District is at. We've also taken a look at tennis centers in the El Paso Independent School District. We looked at wrestling rooms, the Fort Bliss Soto Center, and we are very proud of the Eastwood Middle School Gymnasium. Here were their recommendations. Notwithstanding the Jacobs report and the things that we have to do to address the need at our school, they said beyond that, you've got to do some other things to attract and retain families and students, and that is, we'd like the Ysleta Independent School District to install artificial surface at each and every one of the 7 stadiums. We'd like you to secure the resources to remodel, rebuild gymnasiums, locker room facilities, training and weight rooms. We'd like you to upgrade lighting, scoreboards, and sound systems in all indoor and outdoor facilities. Right? One of the interests that is being considered is the lighting of all baseball, softball fields, and tennis courts. The baseball, softball field interest stems from the fact that if you're a baseball player or a softball player, not just in our district, but in most districts, you're asked to leave class sometimes at 11:30 in the afternoon so that you can start a ball game at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon so that you can finish the game before it becomes dark. We really can't keep promoting the idea that it's okay to take students out of their academic courses 2 times, 3 times a week so that they can go play baseball at 2 with an interest in finishing the ball game before it gets dark. What we'd like to do is we'd like to be the first school district to introduce lighting on those facilities so that, like football programs and basketball programs who benefit from lighting, our baseball and softball programs can have games in the evening, can remain in class and continue their academic studies, and more importantly, have the benefit that student athletes who play football and basketball have, and that is having their parents participate and be part of the baseball and softball experience, because at present, if you're having ball games at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, most of our parents have other commitments. It's called work, right? It would be nice to afford them the opportunity to participate in their student athletes experience by having ball games in the evening, and it would be an added benefit not to take those student athletes out of their academic environment 2-3 times a week. In addition to that, we have an interest in looking at where we might be able to build or secure facilities for wrestling programs, our gymnastics programs, golf programs, some of the less known athletic programs, remodel tracks at middle schools, weight room expansions, But in essence, that was the list that we received from the subcommittee. The same can be said from the performing art group, but the big one is this. The Ysleta Independent School District is the only district that currently does not have a UIL-rated stage. We'd like to build a performing arts center that can accommodate 1,000 to 2,500 students, visitors, guests, so that our students can perform for them here locally on a UIL-rated stage. We'd like to continue to make the investment that we've always made in the visual and performing arts, so that'll be part of the proposal for the board's consideration. All of these things are important to us because we believe in the whole student. Academics are important, taking assessments are important, but what else is important is character, it's resilience, it's resolve, it's work ethic, it's all of the things that oftentimes students glean from being involved in extracurricular and co-curricular activities, whether it's athletics, visual performing arts, student council, speech and debate, mock trial, academic decathlon. Those experiences are what shape and form many of the students in our schools. We'd like to continue and make that investment. And then finally, technology. Technology is critical. The world that they're about to enter operates based on how familiar and how comfortable people are with technology. If you don't believe me, watch two girls in the back seat of my car texting each other, and they're in the same vehicle. And when I say, why don't you guys just talk to each other, they tell me how lame that is. It's just a different world. And the problem we have is that we have so many schools that are so old that introducing technology is problematic. People go, why? Well, because a lot of our schools have asbestos. And it's the type of asbestos that, if left alone, isn't harmful, doesn't present a health risk. But the minute you start drilling and cutting and running fiber optic or installing routers and switches and all of the things that are required to promote the kind of connectivity we want for our students, and that connectivity, by the way, is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because the learning should not stop at the end of the school day. Students should be able to get somewhere near the vicinity of their school and be able to access the Wi-Fi so that they can continue and access homework, syllabuses, communicate with their teachers. They can keep learning beyond the 6.5, 7 hours that we dedicate and call the school day. Because in more affluent areas, that's the norm. They're getting help from teachers at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. They're going to chat rooms where their peers can help and support them. They're watching video streaming of the lesson that was delivered earlier that day by the teacher, and the teacher has since posted on the teacher's webpage so the student can view it over and over and over again until they understand the concept. That level of sophistication is what we need to introduce into our school system. It's nice to honor and respect and want the culture and the traditions and the history, but not at the expense of providing students with the kind of experience that they need to prepare them for the 21st century. All of those things are important, but what's most important, the reason that we exist, is to make students well-rounded citizens who are employable and contribute to not just our economic prosperity, but our society in general. And that society will require familiarity and comfort with technology that, by the way, will change all the time. History used to be defined as long periods of stability with short bursts of change. The world today is the opposite. There are long periods of accelerated change with short periods of stability before the next invention, before the next discovery, before the next exploration. It's a tough, tough future out there. And I think we owe it to our students to try and provide them with the kind of technology and access to technology that will help prepare them for the future. Classrooms should look different. I want to talk a little bit about how you get the resources to do all of this. Depending on your feedback, feedback from other learning communities, feedback from discussions in the community, we need to determine the level of support in the community for a facilities bond to do all of this. Everything I've shared with you would require your support. We don't have $300 million, $400 million, or even $500 million in an account somewhere, and we're not asking for your input as to whether or not we should spend it this way or spend it that way. The reality is we don't have the money. We need to go out and ask our community whether or not they'd be willing to support and assume an increased tax burden to provide the new schools, performing arts centers, artificial surface, all of the things that I've shared with you on behalf of students. So the one thing that we need to be sure of is, what would a tax increase look like? And forever, there's been a misconception that the Ysleta Independent School District taxes people heavier than anyone else in El Paso County. And that stems from a tax rate that looks a little like this when compared to El Paso and Socorro. But the reality is that the Ysleta Independent School District has the lowest tax burden. And I'd like to share that with you because it's important you all recognize this. Let's hypothetically take 3 homes that are valued at $100,000 in each of these 3 school districts: Socorro, Ysleta, El Paso. In the Socorro Independent School District, the $100,000 home benefits from a $15,000 government homestead exemption. Everybody gets it. Everybody in Socorro, everybody in Ysleta, everybody in El Paso, Clint, Canutillo, you name it, you're guaranteed a 15% homestead exemption. So the price of that home, or the value of that home, may be $100,000, but it will be taxed at $85,000. And at a 1.27% rate, that person will pay $1,080 a year toward the education of their children, toward the public school system. If you take the $1,080 and you divide it by 12, that homeowner is paying approximately $9 a month to support the schools. In the Ysleta Independent School District, several decades ago, the board of trustees, adopted a 20% homestead exemption. That means that before you take the $15,000 off that the government guarantees you, right from the start, you deduct 20% of the value of your home. So you don't start at $100,000 when you subtract the $15,000. You start at $80,000. Then you subtract the government $15,000. And so that homeowner that lives in the same home as the homeowner in the Socorro Independent School District will not be taxed based on $85,000, but based on $65,000. So although the rate is higher, the taxes are lower. Let me show you something that really drives it home. Let's use a $400,000 home. Let's take 20% off a $400,000 home. Where are we at? $320,000. And then let's take 15 off that, $305,000. If that home were in Socorro or in El Paso, it'd be taxed at $385,000. So the more expensive the home, the greater the benefit, right? 20% right off the top for living in the Ysleta Independent School District. This number here, it's intentional. Our tax rate isn't $1.46. Our tax rate is $1.36. It's 10 cents less than that for every $100. That $1.46 is what it would be if we needed $430 million in this district to do what I just described. And even with a 10 cent per $100 increase, you are still getting a better deal than you would get in either of the 2 neighboring school districts, but with the benefit of $430 million more in this district, new middle schools, new elementary schools, a performing arts center, new football stadiums, all of that and you would still pay less in this district because you cannot overcome that 20% deduction. You simply can't do it. So even at $1.46, a 10-cent increase from what you pay today, the person that lives in that $100,000 home will still not pay as much as either of the two districts, but have the benefit of an additional $430 million. It works the same way up here. If the house were $120,000 and you take 20% off the top when you start, the house is worth $96,000. You take another $15,000, you're going to be taxed at $81,000 in the Ysleta Independent School District, but $105,000 in the other two school districts. And even with $1.46, you're paying less than what they're paying in the neighboring school district, regardless of their $1.27 or their $1.24, because you cannot overcome this 20% homestead exemption. And yet nobody knows that. Yet the most common response I get is, we already have the highest tax rate in the county. And they're right. On paper, we have, and it would be $1.36, we have the highest tax rate in the county. But no one else lets you take 20% off the top. And the reason people don't remember that is because it's been that way for about 2 decades. And the way we got there was that at one time, it was not uncommon for people to pay $1.70, $1.72, $1.78, $1.80, $1.90 in property taxes for schools. And this district and this board decided that that was excessive. So they didn't change the tax rate because it was comparable to all of the tax rates in the area. What they did was they came up with this: a 20% break for all homeowners in the Ysleta Independent School District that at the time was starting to lose students. So it was strategic. It was an opportunity to see whether or not they could keep people in the district by reducing the value of the home by 20% before applying the tax rate. The problem was people weren't leaving the district. People don't leave the district. What happens is the people that live in the district are now grandparents, and they've had their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren go through our schools, and so there isn't a housing inventory for any of those children or grandchildren who go away to colleges, universities, trade schools, the military, to come back and live in the Ysleta Independent School District because their parents are still living in their homes. There isn't the inventory, with the exception of one part of the city, and that's here in the Parkland learning community, where we do have the potential for growth, and we anticipate that there will be some of that in the future. Not nearly what was projected a few years ago, but we still keep an eye out on Parkland to see whether or not there are any new developments that are going to require us to make adjustments and further investments in elementary schools. Yes, ma'am. Forever. Unless the Board of Trustees reconvene, right? I think all of us know that if we want to see torches coming up the street toward the house, we eliminate the 20% homestead exemption. In other words, it's unlikely that'll ever happen. Now, I can't guarantee that because you never know what the composition of the board is going to look like, but it has survived decades because people have come to rely on it in this district. To increase that 20%, we don't benefit financially because, to take it away wouldn't benefit us financially because the state is offsetting it now. So if we took it away, the state would just stop offsetting it. So it's really a good thing to have. Questions? There's just one other thing, and then I'll open it up to questions. This here sometimes gets lost because sometimes some of our senior citizens can be a little grumpy when I talk to them about a facilities bond because they're on a fixed income, they don't want to pay any more taxes. The truth is that when it deals with school bonds, people that are 65 years and older are insulated from any increase for the purpose of supporting schools. The confusion comes in is because they're still on the hook for the quality of life bond, the utilities, everything else. So they just naturally assume that if there is a facilities bond at the school, that they're going to see their tax rate increase and their burden increase. When you fund schools, that's the one caveat, and that is that for people 65 years and older, it's assumed that they've already spent their life supporting the school, so they're insulated for any increase based on a school bond. Okay, now at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hi, sir. If we could go back to the slides where you're talking about the fine arts for Parkland High School. I don't see Parkland listed in any of those fine arts that you're talking about putting at the top of the list. Can you please expound on that just a little bit to let us know
Let me see if I
what
can
we
get
at
back there.
Parkland
I'm
are going
about
to be
to
getting?
launch this. Can you all do it from back there? I'm sorry? The list of 10 that were recommended. State-of-the-art performing and visual arts complex and conference center to meet all UIL performing art guidelines and meet the performance and professional development needs of the district. The Performing Arts Center would be a district-wide center, so I think you understand that.
Next slide that you kind of went through rather quickly.
Next slide.
Yeah, where you listed the visual arts at
Right.
Eastwood and you did
If
it
it's
at
not
Bel
making
Air,
reference
etc.
to Parkland High School or Parkland Middle School, it's because they currently have the facilities.
But they suggested you use some upgrades.
Now, the upgrades will come as part of the Jacob study. In other words, the facilities for fine arts and for other departments are included in that, what was it, a $9 million or $10 million investment at Parkland High School? Because they looked at the entire facility, it's likely rolled into that in terms of paint and ceiling and carpet and tile and the cubby holes. All of that is likely being addressed in that Jacobs report. I think what they were looking at was the equity piece, where at some schools they have outstanding facilities, and at other schools it appears that they don't even have the facilities. So in some cases it's expanding. Eastwood Knowles, for example, does not have a dedicated visual and performing art wing. So they currently work out of a portable classroom, one of those portable relocatable buildings. But if they had it, then it would have likely been rolled into the Jacob study. So they're all going to be addressed. Everything that you see that currently exists is part of that Jacob study where there's that $10 million investment. Yes, ma'am.
I heard that you were going to close Parkland Pre-K. Is that true?
No, I think what we've been discussing is we'd like to introduce a T-STEM program at Parkland High School and work with the El Paso Community College and Trans Mountain to try and promote dual credit courses in that T-STEM program. One of the ideas was that we would remodel the current Parkland Pre-K program and convert it to T-STEM labs, classrooms for courses like coding and robotics and rocketry and things like that. It was suggested, no doubt. With that suggestion, the idea would be that because there seems to be room at all of the elementary schools, that would it make sense to have children attend a pre-K at the elementary school that they're ultimately going to go to after a year of pre-K anyway? In other words, is there an educational benefit to having a child already be at the school where they're going to go to school so that it doesn't create another uncomfortable and awkward transition to another school? So we've been looking at the research to see whether or not there is any educational benefit in doing that, rather than having all of the children transported to the high school in that location. And I think we'd all agree that that location, even if it remains a pre-K, needs a significant investment because it isn't, you don't get that child-friendly, early child education experience. It needs an investment to make it, the ambience and the environment be conducive to children. So it is being discussed as to whether or not that facility may be ideal for a T-STEM unit, or whether or not the T-STEM unit would be a separate and distinct facility and the children would remain there.
Yes, I have a question related to the T-STEM. Are you talking about making this an early college or
Yes,
Parkland?
we've been talking with the principal and with the director of the T-STEM program to see whether or not we can enter into an arrangement with EPCC where the entire curriculum would be dual credit so that students would concurrently be attending the Trans Mountain campus as well as earning their diploma as part of the T-STEM program.
Okay, and the children that I know that go to early college, they no longer have any extracurricular activities. Would that happen here?
That depends. Now, in some districts, they don't. So, for example, at our Valle Verde,
Yes,
we don't promote the extracurricular
Exactly.
activities. Mission Early College High School in Socorro doesn't have the extracurricular activities. Early college high schools were designed to accelerate the academic progress, not to promote the extracurricular activities. What's happened since then is they've experimented with it in the Fabens, Fort Hancock, I always want to say Stockton, because they weren't going to buy into early college high school if their students couldn't participate in athletics and drama, and it has struggled. It's hard if you're going to genuinely look for children who are first-generation college goers, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and whose primary language is not English. It's hard to conceive of them being involved in athletics and other co-curricular, extracurricular programs and still being able to handle a college-level curriculum concurrently. So we'd have to consider it.
I think that is a very bad idea, personally, to make it early without the extracurricular activities, because of every student I know who has attended an early college school without the extracurricular activities, they are not a well-rounded person, in my opinion.
Understood.
My children have been here. They have excelled. You can ask any administration here. My children have excelled, and they have been involved heavily in extracurricular activities. So I would veto that idea heavily.
Thank you. I think there's someone over here.
How you doing? I went to this high school about
Fine.
20 years ago. Me and this little gentleman over here, we're retired military. Now, you saying about residential income resources. We don't have it over here in Northeast El Paso. Okay, if you've been here as long as I've been, you've seen Conatillo in 20 years grown to a multi-million-dollar school district.
Uh-huh.
And still, there's nothing here for these people to do. Bring in the business. Tell this alderman to get off his tail and do something. I know we just got Sam's, but do you know when these new, like Sam's and Walmart come here, they don't have to pay taxes. You know that, right?
I didn't.
That's where most of our money's going. You're losing students due to military leave, or they see a school, they don't like it. Well, I'm going to go to a charter school. I'm going to go to a private school. Address that problem. Residual income. Put your money somewhere else where it'll build interest, and you'll have money to repair the schools.
Okay.
That's what we did in the military. We cut budgets, fleets,
Okay.
so people can be driving around and spending, money that's needed for our schools.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Hi, good evening. David Mott. I'm a parent of 8th grader and 5th grader. Sorry. I have a couple comments and questions. I actually do have questions like the lady about the T-STEM, but I think as a parent, it's my job to create the extracurricular activities, whether it be club, sports, because my kids want to play sports when they get to college, and if they can get there quickly, it's one less year that I have to pay for their college. Also, the comment to the gentleman that we're in the Northeast. We actually have engineers. I know I'm here from the Northeast, homegrown. We have a lot of good businesses, architecture, engineering, just like the West Side, East Side, anywhere in El Paso. It's time that our community changes, and this is a good investment to change. If we create schools, facilities for our kids that want to stay here, why not invest now? If it's going to cost me $65 extra a month, thank you, extra $5 a month as a college investment for my children, it's well done. Let's do it. The other question is, how can we as a community help you get there?
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I appreciate that. And that's what these meetings are for. They're to collect input. And maybe I didn't communicate well. I have no preconceived notion about what the Parkland T-STEM program will look like. Parkland will have to design their T-STEM program based on the interest and the need of students there. The one condition is that students take an interest, enroll, succeed, and like your children, I played football, I played baseball, I got involved. If that's something that Parkland believes that they can promote without losing the academic integrity of the program, it's entirely up to Parkland to work within those parameters. They could very well be the first early college high school experience that allows students to participate in extra and co-curricular activities. There will be some challenges, logistical challenges, in that sometimes the courses at El Paso Community College may be offered in the afternoon, or the teachers at El Paso Community College may not be receptive to a student being out of class for 3 days because they happen to be part of an athletic tournament, or they're on a band trip across the country. Those are the kind of things that you typically have to address as they come up, because you can't anticipate everything. But I didn't want to give the impression that I don't promote the extracurricular activities, or that I don't believe that those activities have a lot to do with who you become as an adult, because they have everything to do with who you become as an adult. That's where you learn how to compete and collaborate and teamwork and take direction from a coach. There are a lot of things that are in that curriculum, athletics, visual and performing arts, that aren't naturally in our academic curriculum, right? And especially if you happen to be a child or a student athlete from a broken family, or from a family where the resources may not be available, athletics and some of these other co-curricular and extracurricular programs have saved children countless number of times. So I understand the value, and I appreciate what you said. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to meet with the Eastwood community on Wednesday. We'll meet with the Riverside community on Thursday. Everything that we've discussed, and I'll just talk to this until we get the question, everything that we've discussed is written in mayonnaise on a hot summer sidewalk, right? Their ideas, their visions, their thoughts that have been expressed. Ultimately, what we take to the board will have to have a level of comfort in allowing us to come out to the community. It will be the purest form of democracy, because I don't have the money. So if people don't support it, it isn't about getting upset or getting angry or believing that, there goes more government waste, or that, it's excessive, kids don't need that, I played on grass, or I played in gravel, or I walked to school in 4 feet of snow. All of that is interesting, but ultimately, if that's the way people feel, they just simply need to go to the ballot box and vote no. Because without the community's support, most of what I've shared with you cannot happen. With the community's support, there is so much promise and potential in this school district. I promise you it would change the trajectory of this school district for the next 50 years. It would be a significant investment. It would be one of those stories where, for once, a community, a city, did not allow what typically happens or happened in Detroit and Chicago and Los Angeles and New York, where decline continues, revenue is gone, programs stop, parents move out, and then ultimately the only people left in that school district are the poor people who don't have the resources to get out, but if they did, they'd get out. And that's what can happen when we don't reinvest in our schools. And I've always said the character of a community comes down to 2 things: how it supports its young and how it cares for its old. That's the bottom line. It's the bookends. This addresses a reinvestment in a new generation of students who are still relying on facilities that were built almost 100 years ago, that were good for me and you, but that I don't believe are good for them. They need something more. Question? Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir. Just as a parent of one of the football players, I was wondering, is there any talk of getting turf for Parkland High School?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, that would be one of the projects. The turf, the lights on the baseball, the lights on the softball, the lights on the tennis, they're all about a $1.8 million project for each of the 7 high schools. Yes, sir. Yeah, the entire stadium with... I can't hear.
Yes, you need more seating in the stadium also,
Yeah,
because
so it's like perimeter fencing, the dugout, storage, seating, lighting. It's to revitalize our facilities. And if we're going to have lights there and we're going to have games in the evening, it's also going to provide an opportunity for our programs to generate additional revenue, because all of a sudden, parents and family can begin to be part of and attend those contests in the evening. Yes,
Excuse
ma'am.
me.
In May of 2015 would be the earliest if the board and I can work together to come up with a plan that we think isn't excessive and that the community can support. And if we need to work more and get through some of the more of the details, then it could be before you in November. But we're really hoping that May of 2015 is a good time. Yes, sir.
Excuse me.
Ma'am.
She may have asked the question already, but how soon will we see the investment in this high school?
Almost immediately. Now, one of the things that we're going to do different from what we've done in the past is in the past we've tried to handle these enormous projects internally. We're in the business of school. We're in the business of teaching and learning. What we'd like to do in this particular case is hire what they call a CM at risk or a program manager that will look at all of the projects and that will serve at the will of the board to make sure that projects are within budget, on time, and that represent the value that our students deserve. A lot of the schools that we're rebuilding or remodernizing, I'm ashamed to say, weren't built in the 1920s and the 1930s. They were built in the 1980s and 1990s. They likely didn't fall within the budget. They didn't fall within the timeline, and we paid too much for schools that are being rebuilt just 20 years later. It's the schools that were built in 1928 and 1930 that are lasting. And so whatever happened in the 80s and the 90s cannot happen again. We've got to have someone that has our best interest in mind. And when things don't go well, it doesn't come out of our budget, it comes out of their budget. So this person would be paid a % of the project, and any overrun, any amendment to the project, any mistake made on the project comes out of their profit. It doesn't come out of the school system. Yes, sir. Our Our attendance area?
The zoning area for the business section?
Everything east of McCombs.
Okay, so my business is on Dyer and Alp Street.
Dyer and what?
Alps.
Would that be El Paso ISD? Sir, you must leave. I'm just kidding. It appears your business is on the dark side.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just kidding.
No problem. Well, it's fine.
Anybody else? I know I've taken up a lot of your time, and I know it's late, and you're still wondering why they didn't give the ball to Marshawn Lynch. I know that's what is on everybody's mind. Only second to Des caught that ball, right? Of course he did. Any other questions? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We've got a couple of student performances that I know you'll enjoy, and we look forward to providing you with more information. As we develop this, by the way, we'll have a poster of exactly what's going to happen at every school in front of every school. You'll see the poster of all the projects and the estimated cost or investment in every school in the district, so that you can go there and you can look at the project list. Oh, we have a question.
I was wondering if you can do me a favor.
Yes.
Can you take a look at the instruments right now when the band comes out?
Yes. Yes.
It's-
She's referring to the instruments that are available for students, the budget for that, because what we recently did was we increased the number of offerings, and what we need to do now is support that with additional instruments, because too many students are finding it a challenge to rent instruments. So the district needs to look at reinvesting in our own inventory to provide it for students. That's a very good point. Okay. With that, thank you again, and I appreciate you coming out tonight.